you're watching this, it's likely that you or someone close to you has experienced traumatic brain injury and you're looking for clarity and support. In this chapter, we'll talk about how we translate the lifelong effects of brain injury into economic model to ensure proper compensation. I'm here to help you understand and navigate what can feel overwhelming. Welcome to the dollars and cents part of our journey, the damages model. After you've proven that a traumatic brain injury occurred and shown its impacts, you have to answer what should be done about it. In personal injury cases, that means compensation. This chapter is about how we go from understanding a TBI survivor's lifelong needs, medical care, and support, to quantifying those needs into economic terms that count or insurance companies can recognize. It's where the empathy meets the economics, and where we ensure that the injured person and their family have the resources to cope with the aftermath of a TBI. First, let's clarify what damages means in legal terms. Damages are basically the harms and losses for which the plaintiff is entitled to money as compensation. They generally fall into categories: economic damages, which are sometimes called special damages. These are the concrete financial losses, things like medical bills, therapy costs, lost wages, and future care expenses. And then there's non-economic damages called general damages. These cover more intangible losses like pain, suffering, loss of the enjoyment of life, emotional distress. In some cases, punitive damages might be on the table, and they're meant to punish the egregious wrongdoers. But in many TBI cases, unless the cause was something like a drunk driver or willful misconduct, punitive damages aren't exactly typical. So we'll focus on compensatory damages, economic plus non-economic damages together. Traumatic brain injury cases often involve very high damages, and for good reason. A TBI can turn a person's life upside down permanently, and the costs, both financially and personally, are immense. Let's consider economic damages first, meaning the lifelong needs piece of it. The medical and rehabilitation costs start adding up from day one. Immediately after injury, there might be an ER visit, hospitalization, maybe surgery, like to relieve pressure in the skull. These initial bills can be huge. A TBI-related hospital stay is among the most expensive types of injury hospitalizations. But the costs don't stop at the hospital discharge. In fact, traumatic brain injury often means a lifelong of medical expenses. We're talking about rehabilitation therapies, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, cognitive therapy, often needed for months or years to help regain function. There's also medications, perhaps anti-seizure meds or medications for mood and behavior, such as antidepressant medications, or pain medications for headaches. Regular doctor visits are also needs. Neurological checkups, neuropsychologist sessions, psychiatric care, and assistive devices. Maybe memory aids, alarm systems, mobility devices if there's a physical impairment. Home modifications can also come into play. In some cases, if balance is an issue or the person has physical limitations, they may need things like handrails, ramps, or other modifications at the home. Also, there's caregiving services. Some TBI survivors cannot safely live completely independently. They might need a part-time or a full-time caregiver or an aide to help with daily tasks or supervision, especially if there are severe memory or judgment issues or physical disabilities. Long-term care facilities are sometimes needed. In very severe cases, if a person might need to live in a specialized brain injury rehab home or nursing home, they may need this if they can't be cared for at their own home. Psychological counseling is also something that's often needed for the person, and sometimes family therapy as well, since the whole family is going to be affected. A formal way to present this is through what we call a life care plan. A life care plan or a life care planner often is a nurse or a rehabilitation specialist, and they will evaluate the injured person and, collaborating with the doctors, detail all the future care and equipment and services the person will likely need for the rest of their life. For example, a life care plan for a moderate TBI survivor might include weekly therapy sessions for next 2 years, monthly neurologist visits for 5 years, and an allowance for medications for depression indefinitely. Might also include cognitive rehabilitation courses, costs for in-home aid 4 hours a day, for example, plus the replacement costs for things like a new wheelchair or a certain amount of years if needed to replace those items. This plan then gets priced out, and how much will all that cost is projected over the person's expected lifetime typically. Often, an economist is then used to calculate the present dollar value of those future costs, taking into account inflation and the interest rates. To give an idea of scale, one study suggested or estimated that the average lifetime cost for an individual with a TBI ranged from $85,000 to $3 million or more. That's a huge range because it depends on severity. A mild TBI with mostly some doctor's visits and a bit of therapy might be lower. A severe TBI with decades of 24/7 care could be in the millions. In fact, other data shows severe TBIs can easily cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per year when you factor in comprehensive care. For example, if someone needs a full-time caregiver, that alone may be $50,000 a year or more in salary expenses. Multiply that over a lifetime and you're in the millions. And note, those figures, $85,000 to $3 million, are just medical and care costs. They don't include the fact that the person might not be able to work, which is their lost earnings, or the value of their pain and suffering. I now want to talk about lost earnings and lost earning capacity. This is another major part of damages. If the injured person cannot return to work or only work in a reduced capacity, the law says that they should be compensated for that lost income. We often bring in a vocational expert to assess what the person could have earned if not for the injury versus what they can earn now, if anything. Also, an economist to project that lost income over their life work expectancy and discount it to present value. For instance, if a 30-year-old engineer making $80,000 a year can't work anymore due to a TBI, you'd calculate how much money they would have made from the age of 30 to, say, 65, which is retirement age typically, including any raises, promotions, or other bonuses, and then adjust it to present value. That can easily be $1 million or $2 by itself. Even if they can work but not in the same capacity, say they have to take a lower paying, less demanding job, that difference in earning capacity is a damage. For example, maybe pre-injury they were on track to become a manager earning 6 figures, but now they can only handle a simple job at $30,000 a year. That gap each year is compensatable. This is what aligns with what my firm's noted. Brain injury victims often can't perform their old job or have to take a lesser role, and they're entitled to recover the loss of the future earning capacity due to the injury. If the person is a child or a student, we sometimes use their academic record and aspirations to argue they would have likely earned. Example, if they were a top student and can't finish college now, they might have been a professional with X number salary, say it's 100,000. It gets speculative, but that's where an expert comes in to look at that. Other economic damages might include things like out-of-pocket expenses that the family members incur. For example, travel for medical treatment, home health supplies. Also, if a family member had to quit their job to become a caregiver, that can sometimes be a factor in calculating the damage. Now on to non-economic damages. The human losses. This is sometimes called general damages and covers things like pain and suffering, physical pain from headaches, complications, and also mental suffering from the whole ordeal. So we'll start with emotional distress, the trauma of the event and emotional fallout. Talk about depression, anxiety, loss of enjoyment of life. Often TBI robs people of their hobbies, their ability to engage in activities they loved, their social life. That loss of enjoyment is compensable harm. Loss of consortium. This is for spouses and sometimes children of the injured person. Essentially, the loss of the relationship as it was. If someone's spouse has a personality change or can't be an equal partner anymore, the spouse can claim loss of companionship, affection, or sexual relationship. So we'll talk about cognitive impairment and loss of independence. While those have economic facets needing help, they are also a life loss. For example, imagine the independence of being able to drive or go to a store alone. If that's gone, it's a huge lifelong challenge worthy of compensation. We also can look at humiliation or embarrassment. Some TBI survivors are very self-conscious of their impairments. Like if they have memory lapse or speech problems in public, it can be humiliating. We also look at the future suffering because it's not just what happened now, but also will continue to happen. If someone will likely struggle every day for the next 40 years, the damages should be accounted for that future that they're going to have that hardship as well. Non-economic damages are not calculated with a formula. It's largely up to the jury's discretion or a negotiation and a settlement. Attorneys often try to paint a picture of the losses rather than they assign a number directly. For instance, they might describe all the things that a person loved doing and can't do now, or the simple pleasures of life that are now struggles, to justify a high dollar amount for pain and suffering. Sometimes lawyers use the technique of per diem, suggesting a dollar amount per day of suffering and multiplying it, or comparisons. Some argue to juries, what is a year of someone's life worth with these struggles? Ultimately, in catastrophic cases, non-economic damages can far exceed economic ones because no amount of money truly fixes the person's life. So the only thing a civil system can do is provide a form of solace through compensation. To illustrate, we've seen that for mild cases with no lasting effects, payouts might be under $100,000, but for more severe injuries that have lasting effects and continued care, payouts are often in the millions. Indeed, multi-million-dollar verdicts or settlements are not uncommon in severe TBI cases because when you add up a life care plan of, say, $3 million, lost earnings of $2 million, and then consider decades of pain and lost enjoyment, juries might award several more million for those intangible losses. Let's consider a hypothetical or a real-world example of a damages model. Let's say a 25-year-old is severely injured. They have a moderate to severe TBI. The life care planner says they'll need about $150,000 worth of various services over their life per year on average. Early on more, later maybe a bit less. They have a 50-year life expectancy remaining, but discount to present day value, maybe that's around, say, $3 million in future medical costs. They can't work if they would have made $50,000 a year for 40 years. That's another maybe $2 million present value. Now let's talk about the non-economic damages. Perhaps an attorney asks the jury for $1 million per each major category of life lost, just as a rhetorical technique. $1 million for physical pain and inconvenience, $1 million for emotional suffering, $1 million for loss of cognitive function, $1 million for loss of life's enjoyment, etc., totaling maybe $4 million non-economic. Add it up and you're looking at $9 million to ask. These aren't arbitrary. They're anchored to evidence, and medical costs and wages are evidence-based. And so the non-economic argument is based with evidence of life change. Of course, every case is unique and not all get those sums. Insurance policy limits or defendant's ability to pay might cap things. But as an educational example, it shows how attorneys connect the lifelong needs, the care, support, and loss opportunities to an economic reality, a dollar figure. Another angle, sometimes attorneys will highlight how expensive a TBI is to society as well, if not compensated. For instance, if a family can't afford care, the person might end up on public assistance or Medicaid. But primarily, we focus on the defendant's responsibility to cover these because they're the ones that caused the harm. It's also important to present damages in a way that is reasonable and backed by evidence to maintain our credibility. A jury will be turned off if they think the plaintiff is asking for a windfall beyond what's needed or deserved. So documentation is key. bills, expert projections, testimony from treating doctors, and about future surgeries or treatments. We also often have the family testify about day-to-day challenges that they now go through. Not only does that prove the injury impact, it also justifies why a certain amount of money is necessary. For instance, a parent may say, I can't work anymore because I have to stay home to watch him. He gets confused and could leave the stove on. That not only proves a point about injury, but also justifies a claim for either paying that parent for caregiving or paying for an external caregiver. Another concept is mitigation. The injured person has a duty in law to mitigate their damages. They should try reasonable treatment to improve. If they refuse all treatment and therefore are worse off, the defendant could argue some of those damages are on them. So we like to show that the person is doing all they can, taking therapy, their medications, all of that. But despite that, they have needs. In a way, money can make a difference here. For example, affording better rehab or care could improve quality of life. So part of the argument is giving this award, and it will directly help this person live better and pay for that needed therapy and caregiving. One more aspect to talk about is family losses. As mentioned, spouses can have consortium claims. Also, parents of minor children might have some claims for their loss of time or the emotional toll. In a wrongful death, if TBI causes the death, then it's a whole measure of the value of life. But in our context, assuming that the person survived, it's often the case that part of the damages is recognized what the family caregivers go through. Although typically their suffering isn't separately compensated unless it's a loss of consortium, it still humanizes the case. Attorneys sometimes present a day in the life video or similar to the jury, showing what it takes for a person to get through a day post-injury, how much help they need. This can be potent for damages because it says, this is why we're asking for this amount of money, to ensure this person can get this help every day going forward. If a juror sees an aide helping a man in a shower and dress, it sticks with them. And they say, yes, someone like that should be provided for financially. It's also worth noting that beyond the plaintiff's own damages, sometimes others incur costs. For example, a family member might provide nursing care that, if not provided, would have been paid service. Lawyers might seek compensation for the value of the care, even if the family did it for free, because the law often allows claiming the reasonable value of the necessary services, even if the family supplied them out of love. In converting all this to economic reality, it's often about making sure nothing is left out and the numbers are well supported. Because an insurance company or defense will try to minimize this, they might hire their own experts to say, no, the life care plan is overly inflated. They won't really need therapy for 10 years, just 1 year. Or they can do the work from home by themselves. They don't need to go to the work job, so they haven't lost all the earnings. Or medical inflation is lower, etc. There's a back and forth, and the plaintiff side must robustly defend their numbers. If the plan says $3 million, we have experts to justify each line item. Another tricky part is that sometimes jurors have a hard time grasping huge numbers or might be conservative, so lawyers often try to anchor them, giving them a framework to not be shocked by a multi-million-dollar request. For instance, by breaking it down, it sounds like a lot, but it's because we need to fund 50 years of care. That's like paying for 50 years of health insurance plan and salary replacement, plus something for all their happiness stolen from them. When you think of it that way, it's actually fair and necessary. Let me share some statistics or facts that can back up a damages argument. Research has shown that national economic costs of TBI is enormous, like tens of billions per year in the US. One credible source has noted that annual TBI costs Americans $76.5 billion in medical care and lost work. This highlights that on case-by-case basis, serious TBIs are among the most costly injuries. They also mention that about 10% of TBIs are severe, but those cases and some moderate ones are where costs skyrocket. It reinforces that if you do have a severe TBI case, you should be prepared for very high damages. Something else. Inflation and discount rates. When projecting future costs and present value, you consider medical costs inflation, which historically can be higher than general inflation. So economists battle a bit on those assumptions. The plaintiff will push assumptions that fully cover rising health care costs. At the end of the day, the damages model aims to achieve one fundamental goal: to make the injured person whole as much as money can and to secure their future. Money can't truly replace brain function or give back lost years, but it can pay for the best care and relieve financial burdens. As I've pointed out before, money cannot fully compensate for the loss from a TBI. It can make dealing with the trauma easier, especially by covering those staggering medical bills and care costs. That's really the philosophy behind damages in TBI cases. We want to ensure that a person has funds for all the therapies and support that might improve their life and that they and their family aren't financially ruined by this tragedy. To wrap up this chapter, we start with the lifelong needs. Identify everything the survivor will require to live with their injury. Then we bring in the economists and experts to attach economic reality to those needs, calculating costs, lost income, and others. We also convey the human losses that deserve compensation, even if they don't come with receipts. The result is a comprehensive damages claim that often spans immediate past losses to decades into the future. It's an essential part of advocating for a TBI victim, because you're not just telling their story, you're securing their and their family's future. Now, we must remember that the defense is not just going to accept all this at face value. As the plaintiff builds the case, the defense is building theirs, and they have a playbook of their strategies to try to reduce or deny these claims. In the next chapter, chapter 6, we'll switch perspectives, and we'll go over the defense playbook and how to burn it. We'll look at common tactics defense lawyers use in TBI cases to undermine the plaintiff's case. Like we've touched on, lingering claims, attacking the lack of visible injuries, and others. And we'll discuss how well-prepared plaintiffs' teams can counter these moves. Essentially, how do we burn the defense's playbook and keep the case on track for justice? In Chapter 5, we've gone over all the damages that you may incur. If this chapter has brought up any questions that you may have relating to you or your family, and you'd like to discuss it more, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach me at Kelly Law Team. The number is 602-283-4122.